I had a boss who used to say, he loved to say, nobody likes to be told their kid has big ears. At what point did you sit back and say, tell me what's wrong with my kid?
Yep.
I mean, because it has
Um,
to feel like a child to you, right?
oh yeah, absolutely. I uh so I took a second. I didn't, dive in the comments because they were coming so quickly. But I did after a month, I went back and I read every single comment. Just because I felt like, obviously it's your kid, it hurts. Like, like to see those things, like, oh man, no, that's not true. Like I didn't do that. Like, what the hell? And
Say that's
and
you have to
yeah.
have some. You have to be tough as nails to do that, dude.
Hey, everybody, this is the What Podcast. Welcome to a special edition, a bonus edition of the What Podcast.
It's a 2-for-1 week.
You're getting a twofer. Yeah, you're getting a twofer. We interviewed Sam Summers a couple of weeks ago. Sam is the founder of Hinterland. If you will remember, some weeks ago, I don't remember what episode, Brian pointed out or brought to us that Hinterland is going to offer a 90-degree, what was it called, guarantee?
90-degree guarantee. Yeah, I every week we all together just kind of come up with things that seem to make sense to come up with on the show, and then we do a little compare notes, and then we we decide which ones make sense for that week. And I'm just looking around, just trying to do just that, and I see, wait a second, they're giving refunds.
Yeah.
If it's 90 degrees in a festival in the Midwest, which is barely Midwest in Missouri,
Des Moines.
Des Moines in August, or not Missouri, Iowa. Then I'm
Iowa.
sorry,
Des Moines, Iowa.
we were just talking. My bad.
Misery. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, misery. Yeah, Iowa. And I was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
So we got through friends of the show and industry people that have helped us out in the past, and they said, you want to talk to the guy? And we said, yeah.
Yeah. Well, our friend Parker, Parker Reed works for Hinterland. He said, I can hook you up. And
in full transparency, at this time of year when things are so busy with Bonnaroo, we weren't sure exactly what to do with it. We wanted to do it because of course we want to do it. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we love to do. And then we thought, you know what, it might get too far down the line. Let's just get the show out there because it's worth doing. And it was a fun talk with Sam.
Yeah, what I love about it is what we like to do on this show is the sausage making, how festivals are put together. And Sam, they had some issues with weather, their location because of flooding, and then also it got hot. They had some issues with water and all these sorts of things. Anyway, he, and I give him full credit for this, thought, you know what? There's people out there who do this very well, and that would be C3 Presents, which puts on Bonnaroo. And he reached out to them and said, hey, actually, let me go back. And he talks about this. He got on Reddit. He read all the comments about people complaining about this, that, and the other, and that had to hurt.
Boy, they hate it. A lot of Reddit hates him.
Oh my God, that had to hurt. So rather than stick his head in the sand or do whatever, he said, "Well, how do I fix it?" And he reached out to C3 and said, "How do I fix it?"
And that's what they're trying to do. And that's the more present thing. Just a tease here before we get to it. How he got into this and the band out of nowhere that catapulted him into this position to be able to be this successful in promoting will I don't know if it'll shock you, but it'll surprise you because it surprised me.
I think it's a great story. He's that guy that was booking bands when he was middle school and then high school and then college. I mean, he's the classic story. And then he does this
and then stumble on a band that, again, I'll let him tell the story.
Right.
It's a great. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it thoroughly. And so it's a bonus episode for you guys. You can either listen to it this week or, I might, if I were you, I might save it for when you're making your 8-hour drive from Des Moines, Iowa to Manchester, just something to kill some time. But
There you go.
anyway, it was a great interview with Sam, and we can't thank him enough for talking to us. And I look forward to hopefully talking to him again. I kind of want to follow up and just see how
See
the
how
changes.
this year's festival
Yeah.
goes. Yeah, I'd
But
be
the
curious.
the
too.
90-degree thing again, it's not just that he offered it, but it's like that week. If you get there at the festival and it's too hot, you can get a refund.
Yeah.
That's what a crazy concept. So
Yeah.
anyway, here we go with Sam. Thanks to him for talking to us, and we hope you guys enjoy it. Brian, I think by the time we're done with all these shows, we will have had a master's class on how to put on a festival. So
I know it's too bad I'm not 10 years younger and I'd go to all these festivals like I used to.
we should learn something. Today's guest, Sam Summers. Thanks so much for doing this, Sam. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah. Excited to be on here.
Calling in from Des Moines, Iowa, correct?
That's right. Yep.
We're going to talk about Hinterland in particular, but you're involved in quite a few things. And as I alluded to earlier, on this show, we love the sausage making. We love the how-tos and the behind the scenes and the comparisons. So if you don't mind, give us a little bit of your background. Like I said, Hinterland, and I wanted to sort of touch on you. I think I'm fair to say have kind of a similar story to how I think a lot of people get into this line of work, right? You started booking shows while in college.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
It's it always kind of starts as a side hustle here, and I feel like most people I've talked to, there's always been a band associated with who brought them into the business, but yeah, that's just it. I started actually in high school doing club shows, or actually more VFW style. Anywhere we could find a room, booking heavy music, hardcore and screamo and stuff, and then as I got into different music styles, started just coming out of my box and meeting artists and asking for their contacts and figuring out their agents, and then it kind of spreads from there. So one of the bands that brought me into the business was Fall Out Boy, before they were an unsigned artist, and rode the wave with them in the very beginning, from small club shows up to big club shows, where I'm sitting now, which is Valère Ballroom. Played them in 2005. That was what I would say kind of launched the business First Fleet fully. Then finished college, hustled in working world for a second here to pay bills, and opened up my first club in 2012, and then ran that for a couple years. Started opening bars, up down. I opened in Des Moines, which actually we opened one down in Nashville recently, but spread that out to kind of make it a little bit safer to do the concerts, have some different, diversify, I guess. And then I took a stab at doing the festival in 2015, and so this will be our 10th year. Going into it, this year is our 10th year, 11th year, 10th festival, I guess. So
I don't want to gloss over the Fall Out Boy aspect of it, because that's certainly an interesting pivot point of this story. But what is it about? Maybe it's closer to our generation. I don't know, Barry, you can speak to this too, but maybe if it crosses over at all. The screamo, heavy, loud stuff. And it still seems to me, I have a lot of friends that have kids that are getting into their mid-teens and later that are into this too. And I remember this from 20, 25 years ago. It was a flash in my pan of my life of things I paid attention to. Why is that so popular amongst very young people for a small amount of time? What do you think that is?
Let me offer my take.
Yeah.
Because I'm 61. I'm the old guy in the room. And it was the same when I was.
Okay.
It's because your parents hate it.
Because it's just so goddamn loud.
Yeah, exactly.
I was gonna. Yeah, I mean, Yeah, probably a little bit of the same things that make us get into this sick industry made us like, emotional music as well. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's passionate, it's emotional. You can't hear it on the radio. You're the odd kid at school, which
I
is
mean,
great, and your parents hate it.
I used to go to some small clubs and doing the exact same thing you're
Yeah.
talking about. But Fallout Boy getting on your radar at that time. I mean, they were just up and coming. How did that come together? Just at a show one day, or I mean, or is your talent eye that strong?
No, I mean, honestly, like it's that doesn't happen again, right? Like, so that's the
Yeah,
only
that's
time
it's
I've been
lightning in a
part of an artist
bottle.
like that. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
I got a split Fueled by Ramen CD that they were giving out at Hot Topic. It was less than
Hot
Jake
topic.
and Fall Out Boy, and my friends and I got obsessed with it so much that we were, burning copies of the split for other people to show them the artist. And we
Yeah.
all went to see him in Iowa City. They opened for this hardcore band Keepsake, and there was like 10 people there. And like we thought they were massive. Because we knew the song, Dead on Arrival or whatever was on that split. And so we thought they were massive, and we showed up and there was like 10 people there. They were opening for this hardcore band, but they were really cool. They came out, met everybody, and talked to them. And I was like, hey, I do club shows for hardcore bands. And it just turns out that Pete was in a hardcore band, Arma Angelis, with a couple of the other members. And so we exchanged, email addresses, or AIM, I guess it was at the time. And he's like, yeah, book me in Des Moines. And, they didn't have an agent at the time. And so we booked it. I had to find a venue, and, because I was doing mostly DIY spaces, and they needed to be in a real club. So we put him at this place, Vaudeville Muse, in 2003, and put on a bunch of local bands. And it was, it was a fun time,
Now, you're still in high school, or is this later college? By this,
That was my first year of college.
okay. So,
Yeah,
what
'cause
was
we've
it in
all-
high school that made you think you can do this?
I was, really into selling things as a kid. Just all sorts of things. I mean, my grandpa was a farmer, and I would go pick up hedge apples or, whatever, and sell them door to door. And, eventually that turned into just hustling everything, candy on the bus. And when I found out that, what I liked, which was heavy music, was something that I could actually book and potentially, make a business out of it. I was really into that idea, and I didn't play any instruments. Don't have the patience for that, but I knew that I could figure out the business, and so, learned from some other DIY folks how to do that. And, at the beginning, it's a one-man shop. You're printing flyers, which are, just designing yourself, and then selling tickets that you've printed on Word, uh, and then figuring out the business aspect of it, like the taxes and all that, how to put together a business. Fortunately, my girlfriend's dad was an attorney, so he helped me put together everything I needed to get legit early. So
That's usually the stuff that you would put off until it was a major legal problem.
Yeah, somebody knocks on your door, some guy in a suit.
that's right. Yeah, he was a business attorney and was just like, yeah, here, do this. And so, um, I was fortunate. But yeah, normally I think you grind it out a bit until you actually, make some money. Because I save all my stuff. So I've got these old settlements where it's just scribbles on the back of the front page of the contract, and it's like $17 profit. And, but the thing is, in the beginning, they all had to be profit, or I couldn't do them. So, I worked at Pizza Hut at the time, went to college, and didn't have a whole lot of money. So needed to make those $17. Couldn't be a losing thing. You remember your first losing show, that's for sure.
I want to two things real quick, and I meant to say at the intro, I saw, obviously reading about you and your background, and I love the description of you as a serial entrepreneur, which I think you just proved. Does that descriptor fit? Does that work for you?
I think it is. Yeah, it's definitely difficult for me to not think through the business aspect of everything, which can be a blessing and a curse, like it's tough for me to go on a walk without thinking, much about how something, could be a business. And that's from a young age. I think my family was very much into that too. Just having kind of side hustles and grinding it out. So yeah, I think that's accurate.
And one more thing you mentioned earlier, and I wrote it down. You said it's safer. You bought a bar because it's safer to do concerts. I assume you mean by diversifying, you're not putting all of your eggs into, a show that totally bombs and you lose everything, right? Is that what you meant?
Yeah, it's for me, the bar is like it's a, you know, so I was opening bars that weren't in venues. So it was completely disconnected from the work I was doing in shows. And so, it felt a lot safer to open up a bar. And I still feel that, opening a bar as long as you're opening something that you feel authentic about is a easy task.
I want to
Harder,
stay.
concerts are hard. Yeah.
Sorry about that, Sam. I want to stay as chronological as possible here.
Yeah.
So you're you Fallout Boy starts to become a name, and I'm assuming to a certain degree that puts you on a map. It might be a small map that not many people are looking at, but it puts you on a map. That leads to the First Fleet concert.
That's right.
And can you walk us through that just as briefly or as long as you would
Yeah.
like to, as to how what First Fleet concerts because that precedes the Hinterland Festival, which we're eventually getting to, if you would mind
Yep.
speaking to that.
Yeah. So, that how that kind of played out was, Fall Out Boy got an agent. That agent, which was APA at the time, Craig Newman, and then that agent represented artists like Rufio or Alistair, some of these drive-through bands, pop punk stuff that I understood. I knew how to book. Um, and then, those bands would take out bands on other agencies. So, Fall Out Boy took out Motion City Soundtrack, who was represented by William Morris, so made a contact over there. I think it was, Ron Opaleski, who's I'm still pretty good friends with, and then it just kind of spreads. And as you know, it's a relationship game, and you hear that a lot, where you take care of those relationships. And there's nobody else in Iowa doing it at the time, so the agents need me as much as I need them, and uh, we learned how to do good business and find rooms. And in the beginning, we were real scrappy, right? We didn't have, being that there's no promoters here, there weren't any venues either. So we had bars that had stages. And House of Bricks was a bar with a stage that eventually moved and turned into a real venue. And I'd say that was kind of my launching point for First Fleet. When they actually got a real venue, and I was able to book these 300 cap shows. If I look back at kind of our early stuff and our bread and butter, it was mostly stuff booked into 300 cap. I enjoy it. I still really enjoy it. We still book those shows. But that's, as most bands come out of that world. They play that on the way up.
They sure
Or at
hope
least
to anyway. Yeah.
most of the bands I
Yeah.
enjoy. Um, and and so it was, we were booking a lot of our, favorites in these little tiny clubs, Panic at the Disco for $100, or My Chemical Romance, with hardcore bands opening, another $100 contract.
And you're
And
killing
so,
the emos. You're killing the
oh
emo
yeah,
lovers. They're
I mean,
like, yeah.
I was all in on emo. I mean,
Yeah.
I owned eyeliner. I did not wear eyeliner,
I don't know if
Um,
I believe you. I don't know if I believe you.
I mean, honestly, if I figure out how to put it on right that looks good, I would have. But
Makes it pop,
um,
man. Makes it pop.
that's right. And I've got great eyelashes, I've been told. So I just have to,
You and me both, Sam.
I
You and me both.
I got to get that out again. But guyliner at the time, my screen name when I was communicating with Pete Wentz on his was Broke Halo 07. Mine was X Metrosexual X.
Oh man, that's
So
perfect. You
it
guys
was
were emo kids.
it was an era. So but yeah, then for the next 5 years, I mean, I went between you know, well, I was at college, so that was a good safety net. I recommend college for nothing other than it allows you to take out loans that let you start a business comfortably,
Yeah,
somewhat
it's kind of a
comfortably.
problem in the American uh,
It would be if
loan, yeah,
yeah,
overall, but it can be used to your advantage. It can
it
be.
can be, and I credit college because I think I think I would have figured something out. I don't know that it would have been music related. Uh, but I think it just gave me like a nice safety net, and I was okay in school, not great. I I was just kind of switching around with whatever would work with my schedule for booking shows. And then out of college, graduated in 4 years, and I went and I worked at a casino dealing blackjack from 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. And then I would book concerts during the day. And we had a 9 p.m. curfew at our in Des Moines for all ages shows. So I would get done with my shows at 9, go to sleep for 4 or 5 hours, and then go to work 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. dealing blackjack. So
You've
Wow.
got
horrible.
casinos in Iowa?
Yeah, we've got a racetrack
Oh, okay.
and with the poker room, which
Look
was
at
another
that.
little hustle in college. Played a lot of online poker.
Oh,
When you're doing
Midwest
all
ahead of the curve on that one. Go ahead. Sorry, Barry.
It's all right. When you're doing all this, are you the type that has to do everything by yourself, or are you the type that will go to other people for advice?
Yeah, you like to
And
delegate, do it all, a little of
yeah,
both?
like it's because I know I have a friend who paid his way through college by getting student loans, making T-shirts and selling them in like Spin magazine, and then pay off his student loans and do it all over again. Yeah, he now owns restaurants and does pretty well, but he has to do. He's got to pull every nail, put every board down, and nobody can help, and he doesn't care how long it takes. What type are you?
I used to be that way, and I am not that way now. It's just I can't be. I have to remove myself from the situation so others can do their job. You know. But back then, I had to wear all the hats because there was no money to go around. Right. We were doing $8 shows, 8 in advance, 10 day of, and then we would I just couldn't afford to for on a hundred person show have a full team. So it had to be friends that really enjoyed, music, who wanted to come for free that would,
Yeah,
work for whatever we paid an hour. And then we as we started to scale, then we started getting help, first employee, and then that first employee wears a million hats too, and then you get to the point where it's spread out where you've got departments, and yeah, not to fast forward too much, but that's where you start to, be able to spread out into other businesses. If you're fully engulfed in one doing everything, you can't. But I do think there's some value in it. I remember um, Bill Graham in his early years would he had to know how to do every single job,
hmm
so that he knew if people were doing their job right. You
sure.
know, um, so I think there's some value in that. I think early on that was the case for me. I know enough about marketing to know general stuff, but those fields have grown so much, and with different social media taking off, like I can't begin to know everyone's job anymore. So,
So how do you get from $100 shows to Hinterland?
so um, we started. Let's see, what was it? 2000. I'd say 2007. A friend of mine opened up a club downtown Des Moines, which was 900 cap, called People's Court. And because it was, he owned a brand called People's, and it was on Court Avenue. And so we, 900 was a great number for me. We could actually make some money on shows, if they were selling out. And I was pretty selective on the shows I was doing. So most of them were cash flowing. And, that there was able to, I remember looking at it, and looking at the numbers and like, okay, I can add this up to what looks like a salary. I think I'm comfortable here to leave my job, which at that time I'd moved over to a bank, Wells Fargo. I was working, during the day, and I did the math, was able to jump out and do this full time, and it, and then 2009 hit, and
That
it,
changed everything.
changed a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I remember calling agents in desperation and, calling other promoters. You do this thing when you're a promoter, especially when you're an independent. You kind of call other people like, how are shows going for you? Now I know what that means. It means the shows are not going well for them.
They're not just catching up. They're not just wondering how your mother is.
Yeah, yeah. Just cut the bullshit, Summers. We all know. We all know you're struggling over there. But yeah, that was a nice part about, the independent world, is like everybody was an open book. We would just share info, and, I still have a lot of those relationships, like, Mark Leibowitz in Omaha, or yeah, it was
I was
Ryan
wondering if you
Laymeyer
knew.
in
I wonder if you
Arizona.
knew Chris Cobb in Nashville. You said you opened.
Yeah. I met him at a conference. Yeah, he's cool. Yeah,
Yeah, I've
I
got
know him.
Chris Cobb's name written down on here as not knowing you at all, and as much as I can do is as a LinkedIn. It's like I think there's a lot of similarities here between
Yeah.
Chris and Sam, and I bet there's a version of you guys in every little area of hipness, if that's a way I can put it, where there might be some shows and there might be a festival potentially. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Barry.
Yeah, Chris is a Camp Nut Butter former member. He's been in it. He camped with us a couple of years at Bonnaroo, so that's how we know Chris, and through the shows he's done here. And anyway,
Oh,
I
yeah.
figured you would know him. If you didn't, you should.
No,
type of thing,
absolutely. Yeah, and he owns clubs, and I think he's really
In
better
Kansas,
stuff.
in Kansas City for a minute, yeah,
The Truman. Yeah.
yeah, closer to your side of the country. So you weather '09, you get into 10, 11, you're on your way, marching to your first year of 15. How, would you speak to that, how that comes together, Hinterland into 2015?
Yeah. So, at that time I was just I looked at what was doing really well in Des Moines, what I enjoyed, and that was mostly Americana folk type stuff at the time. I was doing like Turnpike Troubadours, or like Charlie Crockett, or
Mumford and
sh-
Sons had skyrocketed in
yeah.
popularity, so that music was really popular at the time.
Oh, it was crazy, and so put together what I was telling myself was just going to be a 2-day concert that I was gonna curate all day long, and then I added camping, and like when I'm planning it out, and then our first year I quickly realized it was more than just a concert when you figure out the kind of infrastructure and machines, and you're building it from scratch. And so originally we had it scheduled for downtown Des Moines, in this park called Waterworks Park, 1,500 acre green space, which also happened to be low lying land.
Did you find that out the hard way?
Found that out the hard way, and so it was. We were in August though, and it doesn't flood in August, right? Except for every 500 years when it does.
Except for when you put a
Except
festival.
for
Yeah.
when you plan a festival.
I know, and so it was. It's kind of crazy how it happened. When I think back to it, we were all set up. First of all, we had no idea what we were doing. We were doing the best job we could, and it was also small. Like it was like 300 people. Our headliners were Brandy Carlisle, or let's see, Edward Sharp and Old Crow, and then Brandy Carlisle played, and a few others, and so we had it all set up, grid out, stage. Well, it's raining constantly, and at this point, it's not flooded, but it's soggy, and this is a stilt-based field because it's made to flood. It's Des Moines Waterworks, and so, I remember the stage pulls up, and truck drivers will tell you, what what you need to hear. And so he pulls up and he said, "I'm not putting my stage on that." And I go, "Okay." And at that point I had already had a backup. So we just had to get into execution mode, which was for us just kind of set up this war room in the office, conference room, get all the teams that, people that were setting up camping, people that were setting up, our marketing person, just general ops people. We got in this room and we started just thinking about what we're gonna do. And I drove down. I said, okay, stage go this way. First, I jumped in machinery to get it to high land, so that we didn't have insurance claims that we didn't need to. And so learned to drive a bunch of that stuff. And then I just started shipping stuff down to St. Charles, which is 25 minutes south. And I was on the phone constantly just communicating with agents, letting them know that I had event cancellation insurance, which was going to, save me ultimately. And we got everybody down there. It was 12 bands because we only do one stage. It was 8 one day and 4 the other. And we refunded all the camping and refunded parking, and then I bought shuttles to take everybody down there for free. And then it all worked out. And I remember Edward Sharp was on stage the first night, and between sets said something like, never would have guessed that this wasn't supposed to be here. And for me, it was a really emotional year. I remember, I'm definitely like, I'm an emotional person, but not usually outwardly in public. And I, pulled everybody together and just like, thanked everybody and like told them how we couldn't have pulled it off without them. And that most of that key group is still with us and, to year 10. But it worked, event cancellation, like I said, saved me, the insurance. It made it possible for me to produce the festival that I needed to produce, for our first year and kind of save it. So
This is making my head spin a little bit. So
yeah,
you did this pivot in a day, like during that same week, right? And with
Yeah.
majority of the same artist 30 miles away in St. Charles, all like that.
yeah, we didn't lose any artists.
Wow.
We made the call on Wednesday, and it was a Friday, Saturday festival. Which, knowing what Wednesday, we're basically all set up, right? Like, maybe we're doing sound checks and stuff this year, like ready, just waiting for artists to show up. So the idea that we were able to do that on Wednesdays, yeah, it is crazy. Don't remember a lot of the details. It was just
I mean, that sounds
trauma
like
response. Yeah.
yeah. That's wild to hear, and it feels like the story would end there, and we never did it again. That's
No,
kind
this is what we love because Moon River, which we had in Chattanooga, has similar type stories. Drew Holcomb,
Yeah.
and Drew told us he and Ellie their first year in Memphis. I think I don't remember the exact number, but he was like, we thought we bought enough water. They bought enough water for like an hour. Had to go find somebody, and then I think their ticket prices it wasn't an even dollar, and so they had no quarters. So Ellie realized there was a laundromat across the river, and so they
Yeah.
went and bought all the quarters they could. Those
Yeah,
kinds of things
it's the
people
small
don't think
things.
about. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Toilet
that's like
paper.
every small business, right? Like there's not a book that tells you how to do the exact business that you've started. And granted, there
Yeah.
are other festivals, but when you in your mind you're starting a festival that you're going to pretend is a concert, you haven't really thought through all those things.
I
So
like that. I like
So
that.
you're
You
you're
forget.
you're in Des Moines, in Iowa, which most people have at least heard of Des Moines. Not, I would say most people probably are not that familiar with Iowa. I did write down, you said somewhere no one else is doing it, whatever it was at that point. Are you an Iowa guy? And if you are, which you're shaking your head, I guess you are. Did you notice that hole in the market, and that's why this is where you were going to go, and then we know why you were in St. Charles. It worked out to keep it in St. Charles. It sounds like Hinterland, that is.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm yeah, born and raised here. I grew up in the Des Moines area, and yeah, I mean, it was we had like a community style festival, and I wanted to do one, more like the curated. I'd seen this DVD where it was like this train thing across the country where Mumford and Edward Sharp and Old Crow played. There was one other artist, but they traveled across the country. And then my mentor here in Des Moines also, he produced the early Grateful Dead shows, 73, 74 Wall of Sound shows in Des Moines. And he's a close friend of mine. And so, early 80s, there was a lot of these single stage type festivals that happened that were super DIY, and they were all over the place. I'm learning now. But his was called Iowa Jam, and there was a jam everywhere, all these jams everywhere.
Yeah, we had a Coe Jam here, River Jam down on the
Yep.
river down here.
Yeah.
And then there was, so, like Bill Graham was the national partner for Steve White here, who was my mentor, and just kind of studying what was going on then. And I really liked all the pictures and stuff from those concerts. And I think, there was a certain sense of DIY because they didn't have these like elaborate stages, right? They were building out scaffolding and, especially like early 70s, right? And then their roofs. So Steve, he actually invented the first roof for like cover, and toured it with a bunch of bands. And I actually have that in my garage here. But it was, this way of touring, or way of like producing shows outdoors was, it's kind of new. So back then, and I just really liked how all that stuff worked. And so I tried to build it like that because it, made me happy.
So part of the reason that we're talking to you kind of came on our radar. Obviously, we knew about Hinterland and would see the lineup, but I want to get into this 90-degree. What do you call it? Program?
The 90-degree guarantee.
90-degree
Got a rhyme.
guarantee, and I think we kind of have progressed to this because this is a new thing, and I want to hear you explain it. But I also, part of the reason I asked you earlier, are you the got to do it all yourself kind of guy, or are you the guy that likes to go learn? Is I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you sort of reached out to some other people, some folks at Bonnaroo that run Bonnaroo, right, and said, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. What did you say, and how did we come up with this?
I went down to ACL actually after Hinterland this year, and just start, because I didn't go to a lot of festivals. I knew what I didn't like about festivals, and that was kind of running around and going to multiple stages and all that. And so my only experience was Warped Tour as a kid. But so I wanted to do single stage where everybody's like kind of chilling, watching the same thing. So not going to a lot of festivals, I didn't really, know some of the processes that happened. And I also didn't want to be too influenced by another, thing happening, or, in my mind, I was like, I'm going to do what feels right to me here and build it out. Going to ACL this year after Hinterland was amazing. Just kind of seeing their processes, understanding how, like, with a company like C3, like, they understand best practices. They do all these things at all their festivals. They understand how to get people around the right ways, the correct ratios.
Yeah, their portfolio is massive.
Yeah, they're the best. They not only do they produce like amazing festivals, with curation and stuff, but just like from an operations standpoint, when you kind of see the back of house, it's just, it's very impressive. And so took a lot of notes, a lot of photos of different equipment. Reached out to a lot of companies that are in these different festivals, and Coachella is the same. I go to Coachella now too, because they're I just see how great companies do it, and just taking notes, and that's how we are working to get where we want to be.
Well, let's go backwards here real quick. What led to and I only have like just what I could quickly Google as far as the weather, the concession issues, water availability issues, anything else you want to touch on from, I guess it was just the 24
overcrowding,
right? Overcrowding.
Yep.
And just speak to that what's leading up to where we jumped with the 90-degree
absolutely
thing.
Yep. So 2024, so I would say we turned a corner in 2021, right? Back from COVID, our first year back from COVID, had booked Tyler Childers on one of the nights, one of his like 2 headline plays. Blew out on the on sale. This is with carrying just about the same lineup from 2020. We basically picked up 2020 moved it to 2021. And I realized that everybody did that. But at the time that was an insane thing. Like just like everybody picking up everything and moving it to the next year. Uh, but yeah, so we that year I remember we put on 2020 and didn't sell that well. Honestly, I had like a great lineup in of Monsters and Men, Powder Childers, and I forget who our Sunday headliner was, but didn't go up super strong. And then with that we announced it, and then COVID happened right after we announced, took it down. And then when we put it back up on sale, it blew out. People were ready, much like most of the festivals. Then so after that, that's when we turned a corner, and like 2024 last year. We had Noah headline, and this is coming after a year where Zach headlined, Zach Bryan, so also another big year. But last year was Noah, Hosier, Vampire Weekend, and blew out. And then also like the early day, we had Chapel.
I'm about to say you had Chapel.
Yeah, but when we booked it,
yeah, you
club
were one
show.
of the festival.
Yeah.
I know you were one of the ones that had Chapel when it was a
Yep.
club show, and that changes everything last year. It's
Absolutely.
the anomaly here. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
It was. Yeah, we could. Yeah, that is something we could talk about for a long time.
Yeah.
How it changed everything. But it was so yeah, big year. Different fans too, right? So like 30% of our fans were from Iowa, meaning 70% were from out of town. Younger crowd, and yeah, just different than we've had in the past, right? A slightly different demo. And I think we didn't do our best job communicating last year. And then also execution on the ground was not our best, right? And so some of the things that we heard is that felt full, or actually no, oversold, right? And people were worried about their access to water. And it was hot, right? Like it was hot for Iowa, which in the summer is super hot. And it was full sun, like 97 degrees every day, with full humidity and not a lot of shade. And so like tree wise. And so being that we are a single day festival and the lineup is stacked, from start to finish last year, Chapel played at 2 p.m. We were scanning our entire crowd every single day, 90% by 2 p.m. And so everybody's on site by 2 p.m. Either, waiting, and we're single stage, right? So they're coming, they're getting on the hill, and then they're waiting in that area with the sun beating down. And so it was kind of like, when everybody is tuned in to one stage and they're waiting for the artist they want, they're not moving. Which is when people do start moving, they're kind of stepping in other people's space. And so we felt, while our capacity were well within like what is considered a legal capacity for the folks we had. There are about 20,000 people on site. So site allows for like 38,000. But when you have people that are not moving, and then you also have a hill where people are putting their stuff and they're going down to the GA area, right? They're essentially taking up more space. And so we had to do some calculations, figuring out what we're going to allow for space for, folks on the hill versus, the people that are right up against the stage versus people that are maybe behind on flat ground, but behind the stage. So just a lot of considerations. And then, placement of water, where we had stuff set up is like right when you walk in the gates, you've got our main water station. So folks are waiting to get in the gates, they've waited to park, and then they walk into 100-degree weather, and now they're waiting to get water.
Yeah,
And
the waiting's getting old. Yeah.
No, not acceptable. And they were rightfully so. It was a lot of folks not happy with their experience last year. And so we looked at that, and I've, relentlessly put together, a plan. I mean, we moved our site to, a, which was kind of already going. We just sped it up, moved our site, added more footprint, doubled our footprint. But what I learned at ACL, and um and also like Coachella and all these festivals is, you know, the concourse area is key, and having a lot of area where people can leave and go do stuff in these different areas to kind of spread them out. And that's not something that we had a lot of in our space. We had, plenty of space for folks, if they're watching the show, but there's nowhere to really escape. Since we were treating it like a concert, there was not, a big enough lobby,
Yeah, I mean,
basically. And
the crowd control is a simple thing to say, but that's what
yeah,
it sounds like was the biggest issue.
At what point, Sam? I had a boss who used to say he loved to say nobody likes to be told their kid has big ears. At what point did you sit back and say, "Tell me what's wrong with my kid"?
yep.
I mean, because it has
Um,
to feel like a child to you, right?
oh yeah, absolutely. I uh so I took a second. I didn't, dive in the comments because they were coming so quickly. But I did after a month. I went back and I read every single comment. Just because I felt like, obviously it's your kid, it hurts. Like, like to see those things, like, oh man, no, that's not true. Like I didn't do that. Like what the hell? And
Say that's
and
you have to
yeah,
have some you have to be tough as nails to do that, dude.
well, but I needed to figure it out. I told myself I needed to know, like, be able to. I felt like I was in the right frame of mind where I could read that and understand what was going on, because we can guess, and I mean, not guess, like we have a pretty good idea of what we can fix. But I think it was important for me to go see everything, and then, I engaged this company here, that is doing, uh, they're going to do this like, uh, basically figure out more information from our customers, by through interviews and that sort of stuff, like on-site, advance, and work on ways that we can kind of improve the experience, and like, and also just, I mean, I go to Universal Studios, I go, Iowa State home games, and figure out what it is about those places that, you know, that they do so great, right? Like music, I've named the ones that do great, right? Just pick a C3 festival. But understanding what makes Universal, what makes, going to a Iowa State home football game a great experience, and its consistency. And so, and then understanding their fan, and Universal is really great at that. And so, I think that's what I'm working on, figuring out how we can be more like that, you know. So
So how do you come up with 90-degree guarantee? I mean, festivals are hot. You can't control the weather.
Yeah, and real
yeah,
fast, we're talking about right. Let me remember early August for
early
Hinterland.
August, yeah, yeah.
It's not
Average,
hot as hell in Iowa in August. Like it's so hot here, and we're
it
only like 500 miles from you, 800 miles from you.
the whole theory of it is like, and this has been from the beginning, is like I want folks to be at the festival that want to be at the festival.
Just to give them an out in case it just like a parachute. I'm done. I
Yep.
don't want to do this.
Yes. And so like from the beginning, like we wouldn't put any tickets on sale until we had full lineup out there, because I wanted happy customers that wanted to be there because they purchased the ticket for this
Good
band.
thought. Yeah.
They can't say like, whatever. So um I when we looked at it, it was just an opportunity for us to, one, acknowledge, climate change, right? And its impact. What, like, our average temperature is 82, I believe, at that time of the year, at specific dates.
Lucky you guys. That's
I
great.
take that in a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
I know.
start at
I know.
92 in August.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. And
morning.
you're humid too, right? Like,
Oh my god.
you get all of that. Yeah. Well, so it does a few things, right? It allows folks the out. It reminds folks that are coming that you have the opportunity. It must be hot, right? So if you have the opportunity to return your ticket because on the grounds that it's too hot, then it must be hot. It gives us an opportunity to talk about what you can wear, what you can make sure you hydrate. Maybe they think about hugging a barricade, they like pace themselves, that sort of stuff. And not to say anything that happened this was anybody's fault, in previous years. It's just, I think that an educated fan that is going to a multi-day camping festival is going to fare better than someone who expects to just pull up and see the artists they love. Festivals are not for everyone.
No, they're not.
Um,
No, and
you
it
know,
acknowledges. I mean,
yep,
it basically says we know
yep,
it's
yep,
probably going to be hot. So I
yep.
get it.
And it, so that was an important one for us, and then just building that like trust back with the fan. I mentioned our first year moving. One of the other parts when we sat in that room, we threw on Facebook Live, we did Reddit AMAs, we developed a email real person at Hinterland, so folks knew like, we there's a person over here answering your questions, and I made it, we're gonna answer everything. And as you grow, there's some questions you don't answer, can't answer, and I felt like we had gotten to the point where we weren't as transparent anymore, and it's something that I feel I'm up for the task to try to get back to. Be more transparent, and I don't want to throw industry under the bus or anything. That's not my goal, but I want to be. I want my fan to respect my product and believe that I'm giving them the product that they're buying. And I think our industry, I think we can do some more work. And if you look at like, I look at industries that are like not great, like from a fan experience, flying, and I just concerts should not be that. Like you should be able to make decisions and go if you want to go, get out, if you don't want to go. And then, guaranteeing the product is something pretty common, when people are selling things. Like, it's no different than a return policy. And I know that is not something that we typically do, like outwardly. We don't talk about that. But I mean, last year, anytime people were hitting us up for returns, on tickets, like we do it. Um, we want people to be there that want to be there. Um, and because it just makes everything a lot easier and
Well,
better long term.
one thing, I mean, we obviously we our show is based primarily on Bonnaroo, and this is exactly we've said it since we started in 2018 that what we love is the transparency. They don't always get it right, but you
Oh
feel
yeah,
like
we've
they
had some
try.
really bad Bonnaroo days, because
Yeah,
of infrastructure, because of crowd, because of weather, all
but they
these things.
hear, they listen, and the other thing to what you said, you want people to be happy while they're there, but the other thing I assume is you want them to come back.
Yeah.
And if they don't have a good experience this year, they're not coming back next year. They're less
Yeah.
likely, right?
That's right. Yep. That's why we also introduced another, for our premium areas this year, like, if you get on site and you're not enjoying it, you don't feel that it is, the experience that you paid 3x or 4x for, that you can return that, or move down to a different thing. Um, I think it's we I think that about Bonnaroo too, right? Like I think that is a festival that is very transparent. Everybody in the beginning is, as I feel most festivals are transparent in the beginning. It's hard to maintain that through 15, 20 years. And I
Hmm.
think Bonnaroo, just by watching, and all their changes to camping and, like listening to fans and that sort of stuff, it just feels like they're very in touch with who they are. And, it's definitely what I aspire to be. I mean, we look at their stuff every year, like there's no one that does camping better. So,
Well, Sam, you've been very generous for your time. I've got to fly soon, but I certainly have one more I want to get to here, and it just came to me earlier and has nothing to do with what we've been talking about. But I'm glad I thought of it, and I got it from your Des Moines Register, the paper of record there. The headline was, I just jotted it, something, these artist crossovers with Hinterland for Lollapalooza. And I'm not trying to pick on you. I'm just meaning from a generalized festival circuit this year. One of the biggest complaints on all socials is these, what feel like mostly rinse and repeat festival lineups. And we've talked about it on this show a lot. I think that the undercard is rinsed and repeated every single year, and most people just don't pay attention to that. This year, it seems to be a lot of the headliners. Now, it doesn't seem to be, it is. And there's 20 that cross over from Hinter to Lala. And the only reason I know that just because I saw that an hour ago.
wow.
Your thoughts on that? What seems to be a newer phenomenon in the booking curation of festivals across the country.
Yeah. I agree. But it's like surprising because to me, like when I booked the festival lineup this year, you're keeping it like, oh man, it's gonna be so unique, and then they start to pop up. You're like,
No,
wait,
it's not.
did everybody book Tyler? Like, and then, but like, at least it's Tyler and not something terrible.
I mean, there's a lot
right?
of really good names out
Yeah.
there, but I agree with the criticism. After I saw whatever it is out in San Francisco, I saw another. I was like, Jesus Christ, it's all over the
I know.
country.
I
Why
know.
are we doing this?
Yeah.
Man, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I know
Well,
we
no.
all have to go, but let me ask along those lines.
Yeah.
Who is supposed to raise their hand and say,
I don't want Tyler.
well, I don't want Tyler, or is Tyler people supposed to say we're already booked in 19 other festivals? Are you sure you want? I mean, how does that even?
That one's tough. I don't know. I don't think anybody's gonna say no, Tyler. Just
yeah,
like
right.
I
I wouldn't
gonna
suggest
want
that. No.
Yeah, and so I think what it comes down to is just people being on cycle, and to me, if this is a massive year for European festivals. If you look at the European festivals, I wish I was in Europe all summer. Because like between Charlie and Chapel and some of these other folks, it just it really comes down to who's available in the U.S. And and we all got great options, but I think like it comes down to who's available, and undercard I think was easier this year. Next year it'll be, as I'm starting to see what's coming up and who's going to be on cycle with record, it's gonna be a lot of options. But to talk about geographically, there's going to be a lot of crossover between Lala and Hinterland, and that's because it's just
Proximity. Yeah, you're
exactly you can kind of connect them, and there's direct flights. And when we started, we were more Americana and country, and so crossover was a lot less. And now it's the other way, because the first thing an agent will do, when they get an offer for a festival for Hinterland or Lala, is they're going to hit up the other festival, to get the offer to go with it, so they can make the weekend. And so that's really how it happens. I suspect it's not a lot of folks talking to each other on our side of it. It's more the agents being this is what we have playing.
Well, and I think we've sort of learned that there was a plethora of festivals a couple of 3 years ago, and there's fewer and fewer. So the same fan is looking at Hinterland isn't going to care that they're all the same lineups at GovBall.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
It's a little of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for the smaller festivals, I think you really have to differentiate yourself from the top line. And I think that's how we got to where we are now is really going heavy on and trying to be a little bit different on the top line. There's some festivals out there though that are, doing a great job differentiating themselves. I think GovBall, not GovBall, what's the one in DC? At Merriweather.
I'm not gonna remember, but I know what you're talking about.
I'm gonna guess. I would guess so wrong.
Yeah, that's a good one. And there's one I believe in Utah too that's doing great. So, yeah.
So again, it all relates. This is how you put on a festival. Everybody thinks all I got to do is book a band and everybody will come and it'll be awesome.
Yeah, I
There's a little more to it.
I like his 20 years later, he can be self-deprecating and use the term guy liner with the eyeliner. Back when I was wearing the guy liner,
What was he?
I was like, I like this guy more and more.
Yeah, what was he said? I have it, I don't wear it.
Yeah, I don't remember, but something tells me about 10, 15, 20 years ago, a guy like him and a guy like me, we would not have got along well. We would not have. But these days, now I feel confident that we can.
We all grow up, don't we?
I know. We're about the same age. That's just what I mean by that.
That's a lot of fun. So there you go. Thanks once again. A bonus episode, a twofer. We will be back next week. And guys, it's right around the corner.
Yeah,
right around the corner.